Joy, could you step over just a couple right there? Mm-hmm. That's okay, that's okay. Do it.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Joy Austin, and I'm the Executive Director of the Humanities Council of Washington, D.C., Humanities D.C., and we are very, very proud to put this program on today. But first of all, I want to make sure that you guys understand that you made the very best decision about how to spend your evening by coming here. So congratulate yourself. I mean, you're a lovely audience. It's a little warmer than a fall day, and I just feel like it's a day where we're all beginning again, beginning to celebrate the fall, beginning to think of our lives. And first of all, I want to recognize our board members who are here. Marjan Shalal, and Tony, and Joyce Wellman, and Humanities DC is fortunate to have a board that supports us and a board that works, and Joyce is doing our Facebook Live tonight. So this is going to be a remarkable Humanities Week. We have them every month, and I hope that we'll do something tonight that will help you to remember this event and also to come back month after month after month. Because I can promise you that this opportunity to hear these voices tonight is possible at least once a month at the Humanitini, many of them here at Busboys and Poets or across the city. I don't know about you, maybe you have too, but I've been thinking a lot about courage and my own courage and my own willingness to speak the truth about myself, and perhaps some of you have been thinking about it in these days as well. Well, I want to introduce you to two people who have remarkable courage in the way they tell their truth and the way they admit and share their stories. And we are also lucky to be joined by Maggie Lemire, who is the DC Oral History Collaborative moderator tonight and facilitator for all of our oral histories, and our filmmaker. Kristen, I did that, sorry. And I want to also make sure that our board, that our staff is acknowledged as well. Lois Hicks and Jasper Collier. So listen, I'll stop now. I hope that you'll enjoy yourselves tonight. I hope you'll also listen to these remarkable stories and become oral historians yourself. Ask questions of them and think about your own lives in the process. Thank you very much for coming this evening.
Thank you so much, Joy, and the board of the Humanities Council. You've all been such incredible champions for this truly unique flagship program nationally called the DC Oral History Collaborative. And the DC Oral History Collaborative is a partnership between the Humanities Council, Humanities DC, the Historic Society of Washington, and the DC Public Library. We're funded through the City Council. And so tonight we're really excited to be focusing on one of the projects that we've supported this past year, which is an oral history project from Women of the Wire, women involved in reentry efforts. And so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the stories, the work, how storytelling is useful in the work that they're doing and the change that Women of the Wire are seeking to create in the community and in policy, etc. And we're also going to be really privileged and lucky to actually watch some clips of the stories that have been collected over the past year. But before we get there, I just wanted to tell you a little bit very quickly about the DC Oral History Collaborative. We are about to start our third year. So we were founded because there's been this growing recognition that DC history from the ground up is vital and deserves to be recorded and remembered as it's happening. We have an incredible amount of resources in terms of the people in this community who've made this community what it is and who've contributed incredibly, and we're also going through a rapid time of change. And so the City Council recognized that honoring the perspectives of DC residents, not just that federal story, the swamp, quote unquote, that we hear so much in the media, but all of the amazing communities that exist here, the organizations, the churches, the mosque, the organizing, the restaurant, entrepreneurs. There's such an incredible range of stories. And so we were founded to help create opportunities for people to get the training to tell their own stories. And to tell the stories of their community. So we offer free public training year-round where you can learn how to do oral history interviews. We'll give you recorders, we'll give you feedback. We offer grants. So Women of the Wire is one of our granted projects of this past year. And again, you go through a whole training program and you work with us to put together a special collection that actually then goes to the DC Public Library and will be there long term. We offer specialized training, so if you're doing a topic such as working on interviews with undocumented folks, for example, you can learn how to do that safely and securely with them. And then we have a finding guide and an archive that shows the thousands and thousands and thousands of stories that have already been collected, so that we're not, fully reinventing the wheel, but learning from those who've shared their stories already in the past and building off of what's already there. So please come speak to me after the event if you're interested in getting involved in recording stories, or if you have an idea for a collection that should be part of this movement. But anyways, so with no further ado, I want to introduce our guest tonight. So we have Lashana Thompson-Ello, who is the founder and the executive director of The Wire. Woo! Sandra Sanders, who is the substance abuse specialist at The Wire. And Kristen Adair, who's the project director for the Women of the Wire Oral History Project and a filmmaker here in DC. So before we kind of get into watching the clips and having the discussion, I was wondering if Sandra, if you could sort of help present the big picture of why we're here tonight, what some of the experiences are for women in DC who become involved in the criminal justice system, the experiences from your perspective that create that, and then also experiences inside and leaving that maybe some of the stories we'll speak to tonight. And if you want to say anything more about what you do with The Wire.
Okay. I didn't know I was going to be opening act. She's going to be the opening act. But I got it back. The Women of the Wire was, okay. The Women of the Wire, I think we gave it 6 years? Yeah, close to 6 years. And we were a group of women that were incarcerated together, and we built a family together. All of us were from Washington, D.C., so it was real easy for us to build that bond because we were in a prison with a bunch of strangers. And if you were from D.C., hey, you're my sister, we're gonna hang in there and do this thing together. So she spent more time than me. I had a lot of ins and outs, but when she came out, she had this dream. And all of us came together, and formed The Wire. women involved with reentry efforts. And what our mission is to go back into the institutions and just be the example for the women that are still in the institutions where we say sisters in the struggle, because that's what it is. And just be an example for them that their lives can change and improve on the outside. Because I was hopeless. I didn't think that I would ever be anything but an ex-convict. And I'm ex-drug user as well. I'm 14 years in the 12-step program. And, so I just thought that was the sum total of my life. So, and all of that's not true because I'm no longer incarcerated and I no longer use drugs anymore. So we've been really, really supportive of one another. And if it wasn't for her, the why would not exist. It was her dream. She trusted us because she know us. We were all at our very, very lowest when we built this bond, and this bond rings true on the outside. So this is my sister. And the whole group of us, we are sisters, and we trust each other. So when she becomes a council member, y'all really go for her. When she becomes a council member, she don't need to build a team, she don't need to interview anyone, she'll take us. We'll be the Wire Women council member lady. Yeah. But it's been an awesome experience, and my passion is to show the sister that's still struggling that her entire life can change, and we'll be here to support her. We go to the institutions and talk to the women and share our experiences with the women, and we take their children. Some of those women haven't seen their children in years, and we put our money in the pot and get the bus and get the cookies and the juice and ride down to wherever we need to ride down and take those kids to see their parents, because somebody didn't do that for us. So we're just really trying to make a difference. And I think that because I made the decision to change my life, I've made a difference. So that's
Do you want to continue and tell us more about the story of Women of the Wire and about the issues that you're addressing that women are facing?
Yes, first I want to thank Kristen for allowing us the opportunity to be a part of this project, for doing all the work and just allowing us to show up and do the fun part, which is to talk about our lives. I also want to give a special honor to the Women of the Wire that are in the room. Mom Twyman, we used to call her our prison mom, man, we call her our godmother. We used to call her the woman in the shoe that had so many kids she didn't know what to do, because she basically raised us and took care of us when we was on the compound serving time. Spanky is here tonight. She's the entrepreneur in the family, so she don't get to get out much. So it's super exciting to see her here with us. Carolyn is here, Lady is here, and to all of our supporters, Olinda Moy and Young Simpson for being here. Young, I work with her at H.G. Woodson, and she provides a support circle every week to girls who live in our communities who struggle with some of the same things we had to struggle with before we got into incarceration. So I really appreciate her for allowing me to be a part of that process, because for us, it's about being proactive and preventing girls from going down the same path that we went down. So only thing I would add to what Sandra said about why we started The Wire is there used to be an organization called Our Place DC, and Our Place provided wraparound services exclusively to women who are incarcerated and returning from incarceration, from therapy for your children, visits with children, for caregivers, housing assistance, anything you can think of, legal assistance for women who were going to the parole board. They provided everything you would possibly need. And right after I was released, that organization shut down due to whatever internal issues they was having, probably lack of funding. And when we came together, the Women of the Wire came together, we had a focus group to basically just talk about what it means that the women no longer have access to Our Place DC and the staff that work for Our Place. And we were grieving because we understood that those women wouldn't get the support that we had when we was incarcerated, when people would come in and teach us about job readiness and bring our families to visit with us and things of that nature. And so we just had an honest conversation about what can we do to fill the void or to fill the gap. And we decided that worst case scenario, even if we don't have funding for housing and we can't give women jobs and we can't necessarily give women the psychological therapy that they need when they're released, the least we can do is provide peer support, and we can provide peer advocacy. And so what we decided to do was to go out into the community and to talk to people like you about our experiences, help the community to understand the need for gender responsive services and programs and policies, because women don't do time the same way men do time. Women don't reintegrate, they don't have the same issues that men have. So we testified before city council, raised funds to take children to see their moms. We implemented visitation programs within the government agencies that have the funds and the resources to make this happen on a regular basis. So we basically mobilized the community to fill those gaps that was left by Our Place DC. And I'm just very grateful for the women because they donate their time and they share their stories, and they do that because they want to make a difference for the women that they left behind. They want to make sure that the women that are coming home behind us have the services and the supports that they need.
Thank you, Lashana. And Kristen, do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of how this collaboration, this Women of the Wire Oral History Project came about, and through that we'll actually get to sort of see what you all are talking about, some of the issues.
Yeah, for sure. And Lashana is one of the most humble people I know, but let me tell you right now, they did the hard work here. I moved some cameras and some microphones and set up interviews, but these ladies are just such an inspiration in the way that they share their stories. And I've known Lashana for a few years now, at least 3 or 4 years, but I knew Lashana because Lashana has been telling her story of incarceration and the challenges around reentry literally since she stepped back out into DC. And I know that because a mentor of mine worked with Lashana when she first was home 6, 7 years ago now. And I had heard her story before I met her, and so her incredible inspiration preceded her. But I am primarily a documentary filmmaker, multimedia storyteller, and I'm also trained as an attorney. And I have been working for about 3 years now on a documentary film project about reentry and young people from DC who are coming back out of the system. And their experiences and challenges, and an amazing program called Changing Perceptions that partners with the DC government to support returning citizen entrepreneurs. But through that project, and in my film, is another one of the members of The Wire, an amazing young lady named Sakina, who came home now, I guess, 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, when we started the film project. And so I learned more about The Wire through that project and the amazing support. She's one of the women who most recently had come home, and the way that these ladies supported her in her transition. And I was at a Wire event not too long ago, maybe a year or 2 ago, and I bumped into met one of the members of The Wire who I hadn't met before, and I said, I know Sakina, do you know Sakina? And she laughed. I can't remember quite who that was. It actually might have been you, Sandra. And she laughed, and she said, do I know Sakina? We raised Sakina. Because Sakina went in when she was 18, and she did 16 years, and so she went in when these ladies had already been in for a number of years, and were her family, right? And so I was so inspired by the way that they have stayed connected to each other and the way that they have built a community. And so when I heard about this incredible oral history project that was happening, and the grants that were available, and me not being an oral historian, but I take what I call a slow approach to filmmaking in the sense of collaborating and letting people talk. There's a lot of media, as you all may be aware, that's being made out there very quickly, right? And sticking microphones in people's faces and say, 5 minutes, go, right? And so I'm not into that. I'm into if we have to sit all day and talk about it, let's sit all day and talk about it. So I started to learn about oral history and say, well, really, there's so much overlap here. And I want to just let these ladies talk. I don't want to tell them what to say. And so Lashana and I partnered up on the grant, and it was a little chaotic because I don't know if Sandra may have said, but Lashana does the work of 3, 4, 5 people at any given time, So, but we partnered up and we put the grant went together and we got it. And so I think we've all learned a lot about this tool of oral history and how it can be just really powerful to let someone tell their whole life story rather than just, okay, so we're here to talk about reentry and women, so let me just ask you about that, but rather, let's go back. Where did this start? Because all of this criminal justice reform work, and all of this addressing the norm that is mass incarceration, and how do we make that not be the norm and the opposite to be the norm around restorative justice. We have to go back, right? We can't just go to, oh, why did you get in the system, or what had happened to you in the system, or what happened to you when you came out of the system, but rather, where are the roots of this, right? And this goes back to childhood and generations and centuries of roots. So we have to start tracking it back, and that's what oral history can help us to do. So what we did, I'll just tell you briefly what we did, which is we interviewed 5 of the women of The Wire, who all have really different experiences, but yet are connected in this experience. And those interviews ranged from 2.5, 3 hours to, almost 4 hours, So this was a serious in-depth dive, and some of these ladies could have talked longer than that, for sure. And I hope we'll get to keep doing this in some way, because there's so many more stories. But anyway, so we are in the process now of processing those interviews to go into the oral history collection. So you'll all be able to read transcripts or listen to them through the DC Library and the Oral History Collaborative. And I guess what we're going to do is show some clips from those.
Let's go ahead and see some oral histories in action. You'll see these 2 ladies, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Sound good? So we'll go down here.
Yeah.
You 2 in the middle, okay? So I can get you 2 in the middle.
I had it in like 12, 13, and I grew up in Southeast Washington, D.C. And, they say that, that's like one of the roughest side of town in Washington, D.C. So, back then when I was growing up, it was a lot going on. Far as, people not having jobs, to people on drugs, to people selling drugs, to prostitution, to bootlegging, to anything you can imagine. You know what I'm saying? It was going on right here. Everywhere you went, in DC, it was drugs, everywhere. And that was kind of like my environment. Like, people hung out, people sold drugs, people robbed, people killed, And when you living in it, you have a tendency of thinking that that's how life goes, and you fall into it. And when you fall into it, you can either go deeper, or you can fall into it and come up out of it, or you can fall so deep that it's no way out, And when I say that, it's no way out, it's only 2 places. You could be dead or in jail. I have friends that's never getting out, and I have friends that I ain't gonna never see again. And it ain't because they locked up, it's because they dead. Like, I have for my friends and stuff that I grew up with, when I came home from prison from doing 16 years, like 85% of them are dead. So it's like, wow. But at the time, when you caught up into that street life, you're not even thinking about tomorrow. you thinking about that day, that minute, that second. You know, what can I do? What am I going to do? Let's go do it. You feel what I'm saying? So it's like, growing up, it was hard, you know, but you come accustomed to your environment, you know, and when you come accustomed to your environment, it's so many things that could trap you, you know, and it's like, wow. And then you look up and you ask yourself, how did I get here? You know, because one day I was in prison and I asked myself that I had to really look into me and dig back and ask myself, like, how did I get here though?
You know, I would go back and forth to court, pregnant or not, shackled feet, shackled hands. It wasn't until I was like real big, because even when you could see, still shackled feet, shackled hands. And it wasn't until the last time I was first sentenced and that they got concerned that I might fall and didn't shackle my feet. But I still had, you know, the chain wrapping all on my baby. I was 191 pounds at this point. And that's when I was sentenced. Was it 60 months? I think it was 30? What is it? I think it was 30 months. But it didn't even matter. You know, I was really enjoying my pregnancy. And then the baby, he was 2 weeks overdue. They could not get that baby out. They would walk me all night, and then I was always hot, so I'd be taking off my clothes and just walking around. Got some clothes on, but it was all women's unit, so you know, everybody in there was pregnant, so they understood. Look, it's hot. This baby is hot. And I would always read to him. You know, while I was pregnant, read the Bible, and his name is Jordan because that's the river that Jesus was baptized in, and he knows that. Let me see, what? Two weeks overdue. I finally went into labor. Out of nowhere, you know, I don't know if you have children, but I had forgotten what a contraction felt like. But you'll never forget. But when you feel it, it's like, oh, I can't believe this again. Out the blue, I just had a contraction. I hit the floor. So of course, you know, they're rushing me down to medical and trying to get me out of there. Finally, we get out in the ambulance. The battery dies for the ambulance. So I'm just all over the place in this ambulance. I mean, I can remember it as if it were yesterday. They end up having to take me to Greater Southeast Hospital. We're in there. I remember the first epidural. I could still feel kicking in my ribs. So they had to give me 2 epidurals. The whole time I'm still handcuffed to this bed. So after 2 epidurals, my placenta abrupted. So of course at this time, you know, he's starting to lose oxygen. So I had to have an emergency C-section. Handcuffed to this bed.
So I was incarcerated. I connected with an old friend like a long time ago that I've known. I got myself involved with different various programs. One was emotional awareness. One was life coaching, life coach. Another one was nutrition, financial. I did computer skills. I went to different like anger management classes, and I would always stay in church. I was working a job. It was in supplies when I was in there, but it took me probably 4 months to get all that. Right, it took me 4 months to get it all together before I could go through all those things. So the first 4 months I cried, I was angry, and I was walking around my head all over my head. I had anxiety attitude. I was like really depressed. I felt like lost. I felt like damn, my life is like gone. Like I don't, lost some years. And in that moment, I was walking the compound. I realized that I had a lot to offer, and it's emotional. And I'm even talking about it, and because I felt like that was it for me. I wasn't expecting to be in prison. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't expecting none of that. The food was nasty. I lost so much weight. That's how depressed I was.
Was there a moment or like something that happened that was kind of like a transformational moment, or was it just kind of gradual?
When I was facing me, like who else can't run from it now? Gotta face it. So, cause I used to run. Everything I done, I ran. Every all my life I ran. And in this moment I couldn't run. Where can I go? I was there. I had to go up the street. I called it up the block, back to the cell. Up the block, back to the cell. I can't run from me. I had to deal with me. That's why I dealt with me.
Doesn't have anywhere to go. So that was a fear. I knew I could be in the halfway house, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. So when it got time for me to be released, and I knew that the halfway house was the address for me, I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to leave. Because I had a sense of security. I knew what was going to happen every day. And, you know what I'm saying? From sun up to sundown, I knew what was going to happen. I've been out of society 7, 8 years. And so they're going to thrust me back into society, and I don't have a clue. I don't have an ID, I don't have an address. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what's going to happen. And I was able to, because everybody knows when you're getting ready to go home or whatever. You be good, you stay out there. And felt like I was abandoning them. Because I was, after the 7 or 8 years, I was in and out. So I encountered them a lot, where they were doing 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years straight, And I remember hearing one of them say, I wish I could go home. You need to stop coming in here. You know what I'm saying? And that tore me up. Didn't wake me up right then. No, it kind of tore me up because it was one of my good friends. And I didn't know if she was going to ever come home. And she didn't either. But I kept getting these opportunities to come home, but I couldn't stay home because the drugs that, got out and started doing the same thing all over again. Because I didn't have a plan. I had a whole lot of I'm going to do's, but I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what was going to happen, what was supposed to happen. So they let me out and get to the halfway house, and the next day they want you to go get your ID or something. I've been in society for 7, 8 years. How do I do that? I'll never catch the bus from Southeast DC. I grew up in Northeast DC, where I haven't been in 7 or 8 years. I've been in Danbury, Connecticut, And I went to the bus stop, and I turned around and went back to the halfway house. And I called my aunt and said, could you please come get me? Because I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go.
It was always easy to build relationships with other DC women because we all shared a unique experience. Most of us were serving parolable sentences. Most of us were incarcerated on violent offenses, and we were very far away from home. Didn't have a lot of opportunities for visits and phone calls and things like that. So forming an alliance with one another, forming a bond with one another was easy. And then as younger women would come into the system, they would sort of look to me for support the same way I had looked to the older women for support. And I would encourage them to like get their GED, take classes, and do things to prepare themselves for release. And so, yeah, it was pretty easy to build relationships and maintain those relationships. And it was just like we was receiving reciprocal help from one another. You know, each one teach one. Women were just pouring into each other and just helping each other to navigate the incarceration process and to prepare for reentry, maintain family ties. But like with me, my son was a young adult, but he has a disability. So it was like the same thing, in my opinion. You know, my family had cared for my son. You know, my daughter was grown, and my son was a young adult, and they had cared for him, helping to maintain his medical needs, and you know, helping to make sure he had everything he needed to make it through high school. And the expectation was like, okay, now you're here, you can do this. Even though I had no experience raising children whatsoever, because when I went to prison, my son was 10 months and my daughter was 3 years old and I was 19. So there was an expectation that because you are a woman, you know, that we know that you have the capacity to do this and you have no choice but to do it. It's in your best interest to do it as quickly as possible so everybody can be happy. And so it's important that people who are working with formerly incarcerated people understand the challenges that women face.
Really incredible work that all of you did together. Thank you again for sharing moments of your stories with us. And I didn't actually sort of define oral history, but what makes an oral history is that you're really facilitating the story from the interviewee's point of view. Your objective as the interviewer is to create as much space as possible for a complex, nuanced, full story. Not only the challenges, but also the beauty, the hope, the aspiration, the future. And it's a way to create a meaningful, beautiful, honoring encounter between two people. And then when we get really lucky, we get to take those stories and share them out in spaces like this so that we can learn and create bigger communities and grow. So I think where I want to start is just asking, you know, how did it feel to tell your story and to watch these stories? Why did you, maybe decide to participate?
So like Kristen said earlier, I have been sharing my experience with incarceration since I was released very early on. There's a documentary, it's called Time Zone, and Gabriella, who is sober, she followed me for the first 2 years of my reentry process. And when I went through that process with her, I realized after the fact that it was therapeutic because I had somebody who I could bounce my thoughts off of. I could reflect about my past experience, what I was dealing with at the moment, and then I could actually watch it and hear what I was saying and see the process that I was going through. So I found that it was a very healing process. I think Gabriella had a special way, like the same way this Kristen spoke about earlier, as her mentor, where she made me feel like I could own whatever it is that she was creating along with her, because it was my story. And if I said something or she put something in the documentary that didn't feel comfortable enough and I asked her to take it out, it's like not a big deal, because she really wanted me to be able to tell my story. So this was very easy for me because I had been doing it for so long, and I realized the power of storytelling. And I understand that the more you are able to understand your story and tell your story, the more you're able to live with it. And it's no different than going to see a therapist, talking to your therapist about whatever it is that you're going through. Or I just think that for me, it allowed me to like sort of shape my story as well, because if somebody else tell your story and they get to put whatever spin they want to put on it, I was able to not just shape my story, but also the Women of the Wire have been able to shape the narrative of formerly incarcerated women as a whole. Because at the end of the day, we're just people, women, who most of the time have experienced trauma. A lot of that trauma has led to sexual abuse, or extreme violence, and so we landed ourselves in prison. And it's still happening today, 25 years later. We have women and girls are the fastest growing group of people that are becoming incarcerated. And it's because of trauma and abuse, sexual abuse that they're enduring at the hands of family members and friends who they trust. So it was easy for me because I understood that knowing your story and sharing your story helps you heal, because this understanding systemic violence and the role that it plays, or understanding trauma and the role that it plays helps you kind of let yourself off the hook for some of the choices that you made, especially when you were so young and you had so little to work with. So for me, it was easy because I understood the benefits of it.
For me, it was easy as well because I've been telling my story for 14 and a half years since I've been involved in this 12-step program. So it's easy for me to just tell y'all the truth, because if I tell you all a lie, I'm telling myself a lie, so I'll never be able to get help for what's really, really going on the inside. So it's easy for me to expose myself because I want to help somebody, because somebody else may be continuously using drugs, and don't know that they can stop using drugs. Because I didn't know that I could stop using drugs. I don't have a real long criminal history because that wasn't my issue. It was the drug use that was my issue. Crack cocaine took over my entire life. And I just thought that was the sum total of my life. And only to find 14 and a half years later, that was not the truth. So I learned how to tell people exactly what happened, what it looked like now, and I had plans, good, strong, positive plans for my future, because I am a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen today. I didn't walk in this room, and none of you all said, she used to smoke crack, and she used to be in jail, because I don't look like I used to smoke crack, and I don't act like I used to smoke crack. I don't act like I used to be incarcerated. So when we go back into the institutions with the ladies that are looking like it and are acting like it, we have to set the example for them, because it's hope for them, just like it was hope for us. I don't think that the bond that we all have is still there in the institution. I don't think it's still there. So when they come out, they need somebody to lean on. I can't go in there with a PhD and say, hey, I can help you. But I can go in there with 213-656-0117-0000. I can help you because I am you. Because if I make one bad decision today, all of that will change. So today I just try to be positive. I'm always honest. I'm going to tell the truth about myself. Some people can't handle it. Some people don't want to know the truth. But I need to tell the truth to myself, and it makes it easy to tell the truth to anybody. Anybody. Because now you can't judge me. I own my truth. What happened, happened, and I know who I am today.
Yeah. Well, actually, and what I want to say is a little bit about just following on what both of you said, which is that the way that we understand ourselves and the way that we understand the world and each other is through stories, right? And so the way I think about this work and the reason I do this work and the reason I do this work in the way that I do it is because it is twofold. It's internal and external at the same time, right? Because it is absolutely therapeutic to tell your story and to speak your story and to speak your truth. And it's a self-healing process, but it's also a community healing process for us to share these stories, right? And so, and the way I think, and particularly with this project, I mean, all the projects that I've worked on around formerly incarcerated, currently and formerly incarcerated folks, but because as women, and there are a lot of women in this room, I'm looking out and there are a lot of women in this room, right? And we as women share common bonds as women, right? And so I think this work is so important for people to be able to make personal connections. There are people in this room who have been incarcerated, and there are people in this room who haven't and who have never had a family member or someone close to them being incarcerated, right? But the way that we can fix this thing, right? The way that we can attack this thing that is mass incarceration is for people on both sides of that divide to come together. And the way we do that is with stories, right? As you see from and hear from these ladies that we're making bridges, right? And the work that we're all doing is to make a bridge from folks who have this experience to folks who don't, but who can vote and who can speak out and who can give money to organizations like The Wire and who can mentor a formerly incarcerated member of the community in DC and who can hire a formerly incarcerated person. So yeah, that's all. So that's why we do what we do.
Well, you answered the question I was going to ask, which was, why for you did you go from law to storytelling and film?
The reason, because there's a lot of people out here, and I respect them, and there are many people who are doing amazing work, who are doing advocacy work around criminal justice. I don't like that terminology, but criminal justice, because there's very little justice in criminal justice, but reform work, and they're doing good work, right? But they might be the PhD or the lawyer that walks into a room and says, I know how to fix this, or I know how to help you. And I don't think we've gotten very far with that, right? So this is the thing, right? These ladies leading the charge in the movement, rather than those of us who call ourselves advocates. And I like to think about the work as amplification, right? I have a microphone and I have a camera, but I'm not telling a story. I'm just giving you a platform to tell your story.
So I think we'll go to the audience in a second, but before we get there, a lot of different issues have come up in the excerpts that have been shared, being pregnant, for example, dealing with reentry, sort of your story, Sandra, you didn't know where to go or how to get there. So what are some of the things that you all are really passionate about working on and some of the changes that you want to see? And how do you see storytelling fitting into that as well? The role of narrative.
We're working on so many things, but I guess the thing that's near and dear to my heart at this moment is girls who are living in the same community where I was born and raised, in Ward 8, Southeast DC. We've just had a huge spike in violence and shootings and homicides. I think this summer alone, about 3 to 4 girls were shot. Children, girls, young girls, shot. One recently was shot in the ankle in Woodland Terrace. One girl was killed this summer. She was 10 years old. And I appreciate the public outcry as a result of that. But several other girls were shot. Young girls were shot this summer throughout that community in Ward 8. And so one of my biggest concerns right now is how can we protect our girls? So if there was anything I could say that I'm really passionate about is supporting girls, whether it be through Circle, through mentoring, programs, activities, whatever it is that they need, but also amplifying the voices of girls who are becoming the fastest group of people that are incarcerated, but yet and still this is so because they are victims of crime. They're overexposed to violence, they're over-policed, and they're just suffering through so much harm in our communities, in our whole household. So if there's one thing I think I could say, me personally, and I guess The Wire as a whole, we're really concerned about girls growing up in the inner city communities of Washington, D.C. right now, because we don't want them to have the same experiences that we had. And like I said, it's been 25 years since I grew up and was incarcerated. And nothing seems to be changing for these particular girls that I'm speaking of.
For me is the drug addiction. The epidemic, the KT epidemic has totally taken over this city. And where I work is homeless families. I work with homeless families. Picture that. I work with homeless families and the mothers with their children. And they come in and they're high off of whatever. And the first day, oh no, I ain't high. They don't know who they talking to. This high. I know when you high. because I used to be high, so I know when you high, you know. And my passion is to help them turn that around. At least make one step to turn it around. I can't stop nobody from using, because nobody can stop me. It's something you have to want to stop doing for yourself. So I think I work there to be an example for them. I didn't get the opportunity to raise my son. My son is 37 and 38. In November, I abandoned my son when he was 2 years old, and I was gone for 25 years. My son is also formerly incarcerated male. He did 10 years. So it's that I put on fall far from the tree type thing, but we had a better relationship now. He's been free for 8 years. He hadn't gone back. If he go back, he on his own, and you already know that. That's not what we're doing anymore. So my passion is the drug addiction and what women have to go through in the grips of. That's my niche in the wire, you know. So I want to lead by example. So I know that that's a big thing to carry on my shoulder. So that means that I have to stay on this side myself. If I want to be the example, I have to stay on this side. And because I've never lived like I'm living before in my entire life, I have no other side to be on. So I want to just be that that person that encourages and motivates women. Listen, it's a battle.
For sure. And I'll just say one more thing, which I referenced already. From my perspective, and I am absolutely part of this movement and part of this work. I'm not, you know, a neutral observer, media maker. I'm in it, right? And I think what I have thought a lot about, and I'm continuing to think a lot about, is creating opportunities for returning citizens in DC to have employment, have sustainable employment, have an opportunity to advance in their employment, so not just having minimum wage opportunities, but having management opportunities, having entrepreneurship opportunities, and having platforms to be part of the advocacy work as well. So.
You even have a new media collective.
I do. Is that my cue? Yeah. So I am in the process of launching a nonprofit that's called Unchained Media Collective. That is a collaboration with myself and my collaborator, my primary collaborator, who helped me vision this project. His name is Halim Flowers. Some of you know him. He is currently incarcerated juvenile lifer from DC. So he's approaching 22 years. Since he was 16, he got a life sentence as a child here in DC. And we are in a process, us in the movement are in a process of helping and supporting folks who have been incarcerated as children who got long sentences to be resentenced and released based on a change in the law that the DC City Council and also the Supreme Court helped with. And in any case, so also thinking about ways to bring the stories from inside of the system out into the advocacy effort as well. So, yeah.
Thank you all so much for sharing. It's really powerful, and I would love to now open it up to anyone who has a question or a comment, something to share, maybe an experience you've had related to our topic tonight.
Thank you very much for all of you sharing your stories. I know that could not have been easy when you started, so it's really, I'm really appreciative that you were able to keep it going for so long. So thank you very much for that. I have one question about when you're offering these opportunities to speak with people, and you know they're looking for jobs, and you know they're in a certain kind of headspace about the desperation to find a job. Like, how do you keep them encouraged through that process so that they can have what they need to get themselves to the next level?
It's a lot of layers to it, because we know that the mental health is a major issue. With most women prior to incarceration, men and women prior to incarceration probably have some sort of mental health issue that they're dealing with that lands them in prison. And then when they're in prison, it's neglected and made worse. So then they come home and they probably need to get some mental health support. but I also would recommend peer support, like we've been talking about earlier. There are men and women who mentor each other and support each other through the reentry process, and they can better help you navigate because they use these services themselves. They know what's real and what's not real. They know what agencies are willing to hire returning citizens and what agencies are not. And they can just help you, first of all, motivate you and keep you inspired to do the work because it's hard. But second of all, they can help you to just be able to jump over some hurdles and get through some challenges that you may not have to necessarily go through because they already been through some of these things. So I would say make sure that they have peer support from somebody who's been formerly incarcerated or somebody who has had to navigate those processes.
And a lot of the women of the wire know how to write resumes. So we can help them write their resume. And I'll take somebody by their hand and help them go get their ID because no one took me to get my ID. And I was standing at the bus stop terrified because I didn't know what to do. I really did not know what to do. So they can call on one of us. You know, and if we're available, we'll make ourselves available to help them get, you know, step by step by step. That's just what we do because nobody did it for us. We kind of like did it for each other. I remember Sakina when she came out, we was like right on top of her when she came out. And she's doing absolutely wonderful today. So, you know, we stand by what we stand by. But they have to reach out to us in order for us to help them. We just don't go looking for them. If you reach out for us to help you, we're gonna do everything. I'm gonna do everything in my power to help, and I know that she is.
Same question. Yeah, I can do this all day. So, to the young lady, Kristen, okay. You got into the filmmaking process and telling these stories. That seems like an arduous journey to go from law school, from getting a law degree to doing this type of work. What motivated you to document stories?
That is an excellent question. It is a journey, right? But I was working in nonprofit advocacy. I was essentially lobbying for nonprofits, which is good and important work. But I actually was in a place where I was about to leave a job at a nonprofit, as we all do. We make transitions, and I wasn't quite sure what was next, and it didn't feel like that was what was next. And so I got involved with some volunteer opportunities, and I had done some training around. I also happened to be a teacher of yoga and mindfulness, and so I had done some training around working with at-risk and incarcerated youth. And I started, this is about 7 years ago now, and I collaborated with a friend to start an after-school program around mindfulness and art and creative expression for young people incarcerated in a juvenile facility in Northern Virginia. And I was there for about 4 years, going weekly, in and out volunteering, and just got to know the kids. And part of that was that we were giving them a platform to tell their story, in part through creativity and art, which was powerful, but also then seeing that, and these were kids that were relatively short, having relatively short sentences, so maybe they were there for a month or up to 6 months, and that's it, right? But I was there for 4 years, and I saw the same kids over and over again. And this is like 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, and they would come for a month, and then you wouldn't see them for 3 or 4 months, and then they would pop right back up, and it's like, what is going on out there in the world that these kids just keep ending up back here? And you start to see that the roots of the cycle, right? And the number one factor that contributes to incarceration as an adult is not exposure to violence, is not trauma, but is incarceration as a child, as a juvenile in the juvenile system. Basically, the juvenile justice system in this country is churning out criminals, adult criminals. We don't like to use that word, but is churning out people who commit crimes, right? And so, anyway, so that's how I got involved. And I ended up, I was a photographer since I was young, but I knew nothing about making moving pictures, so I ended up going back to grad school to learn how to do that. And I showed up at grad school with the intention that I wanted to work around criminal justice issues. Met my mentor, who also was the storyteller of Lashana's story, and all the points intersect, and here we are.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Bradford. I'm a member of the Wire as well, but the lady asked the question, how does the Wire support, how do they best support the women coming out? I wanted to share a little bit about my experience with that. I came home in February, and I spent almost 24 years incarcerated, and I'm not from DC, but I did time with all these women, in DC. And when you're incarcerated or anything in life, you just really want to be a part of something, you know what I'm saying? And when people are authentic, when they are real, And the bond that the people from DC had was real, and it was authentic, And I just kind of like, I gravitated towards that, and I made some very good friends, So when I was released, I went back to the state that I was, got convicted in, but there was nothing there for me, And, these women talked about the Wire and, what their mission was and, what their intentions was and how they really wanted to help women and stuff. And I put them to the test, And I came here, and I didn't have anybody and I didn't know anybody but these women that I was incarcerated with. And they wrapped themselves around me, just like they said. You know what I'm saying? So this ain't no game, There's a lot of non-profit organizations out there that have become a business. That really finance salaries and stuff like that, do very little for the initial mission, I know they can't help everybody, but there's a lot of nonprofit organizations in Washington, D.C. that are not supporting their mission. And the Wire ain't got no money. And they're supporting their mission. They come out their pocket. I stayed at Union Station for 2 days. When Lashana found out there, she said, get your bags, She took me down to her job with my luggage, and she used the resources that she had, her network of resources, and they found me a place to stay, She came out of her pocket. She fed me. There's other people that gave me wisdom smart card tickets, you know what I'm saying? Just pointed me in every direction I needed to go to build my life, and I'm an addict. You know what I'm saying? I'm trauma infected, I got some deep-rooted issues. I'm mentally unstable, you know what I'm saying? So it could have been very easy for me to come back and be like, just fall back into what I know, But I want to know something different. And they showed me something different. And from February to today, I went through a couple of programs. I started me a business. I started taking a business. I just got recently hired in the local painters union, so it's like, I got a place to stay, I got a truck, you know what I mean? And this is just in February. If it wasn't for the women of the Wire, none of this would have happened. I would be high somewhere, probably robbing all y'all, you know what I'm saying? I'm keeping it real. I'm keeping it real, y'all, because it's serious out there. People want to eat. People need to live, you know what I'm saying? But if somebody ain't there to show them how to do it different than what they know, then they're going to do what they know, you know what I'm saying? And then the whole process of going back in and out of, this is going to happen, or I'm going to die out there, just like the girl said in the film, you know what I mean? And you know what, because life is how it is, I've been talking about it's a grind, it's a struggle. I used their resources and kind of went on my way. But sitting here now today is like, I can't do that, you know what I'm saying? I got to come back in, you know what I mean? I got to come back in. I got to show people that this is what happens, y'all. This is what can happen, But it's really easy because, when you're dealing with some other issues, though, it's like you don't know how to compartmentalize everything. You know what I'm saying? You're just trying to figure it out. You know what I'm saying? And everybody got their life that they going through. But as long as you have a clean day, you ain't did criminal crimes. You know what I'm saying? You gonna have a successful day. So the Wire is a serious business. I think all y'all should go in y'all pockets. You know what I'm saying? Because really, when the women's coming out of here, you know what I'm saying? There's these gap services, y'all. Yeah, there's organizations, there's Catholic charities, there's all these different things. But in the meantime, how they gonna eat? How they gonna get from one place to the next? Where they gonna sleep? These women do that out their own pocket. All right, thank you.
And I would thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't say Kim Radford Bradford of The Wire, who also was part of this oral history project team and went through the training with us at DC Oral History Collaborative. So thank you for all your amazing work, Ken.
You see, we got the money. Yeah. How y'all doing? I started a while. They laugh because they know me. But I just like to talk about my friends though because they are amazing. And I swear to God, I stand in awe of Snoop because I swear when I first met her, I couldn't get 2 words out of her. Like it was just what, yeah. And when we got in the feds, it was like this light went on. And it's been amazing to watch her turn into this right here. And I swear I am so proud of her. I get mad at her because she don't call me when they doing the documentaries and all that. They don't call me yet. But you know what I'm saying? Because I keep trying to explain it. See, I got to tell people this. I make my money different than them. They get paid by the hour, I get paid by the head. So I don't have to be in place. You own your own business, you can leave it. No, can't do that. But I swear I'm so proud of my friends. I love what they doing. They out there and they in the streets and they making it happen for a lot of people that for real wouldn't have no other alternatives if they wasn't out there doing what they doing. And I just commend them. You know, I swear I tell her all the time, Sean, I stand in awe because I seen it from the beginning. You know what I'm saying? I did 10 years with Snoop and I'm like, yo, you are amazing. When she came, my nickname for her was Lil Malcolm. It's like she started teaching Black history in the Fed. Man, all us had to go to everything she did, we had to go. Like, you know, we go unit to unit, come on, man. She was going to Black history class, man. You know, we all had to participate. You know what I'm saying? So when she came home, she came to see me first. I was like, oh, not home. So I called everybody. I was like, y'all know Snoop home. So get ready, because it's coming. And here they are, and I'm just so proud of them. I swear to God, I love her. You know, that's my baby. You know, that's my little sister. Sandra, all of them, man. You keep a mermaid together, girl. You doing this, man. Man, and I'm just saying, I be so proud of them and stuff, man. So, you know, I told them I was going to show up. She didn't know I was coming today. And they talk bad about me. You don't ever come to that. Mermaid told me what she said. We're going to talk about that later. But, yeah, they're my friends, and they out here. And we got friends that's like, oh, everybody that we was locked up with, like from state to state. My friend Terry Minor just won what's she, a council member? My friend did 23 years up there in Pittsburgh for armed robbery and drugs, and then she got a Terry Minor Day, and she just got elected to some type of, what's she, a council member or something? Yeah, my friend run for mayor. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, it's like security. I called her. I said, what you leaving them people up there? In Pittsburgh, they gave you a whole Terry Minor Day. Like, and it's just like these my friends, and we was in the trenches together. Like we was all we had, and they talk about the bond that we had as being from DC. But tell them, in the feds, they thought we was a gang. They thought we was a gang. I was the one used to be the one to get locked down all the time. They thought I was running the gang. They thought I was the leader of the gang. I said, you mad at me because my friends got respect for me, but you know, we was just family because if you from DC. And you wasn't coming up there being dramatic and you was all about getting your life together, go back out on the street, do good, yeah, we brought you in. But if you was on some noise, like, she from DC, you know, do you know? No, I don't know. Oh, you don't know? Okay. You know what I'm saying? We couldn't get with a whole lot of nonsense, but it was just family. We used to do Christmas, gift exchanges and stuff. Like, we had the brothers, sisters-in-laws, aunts, uncles. Only thing we didn't have was no father. Montwine we did not have no father. I don't let us know who our father is. But Montwine was our mom in that joint, and she, you know, kept us together, and we like raised each other up. And my friend that came out here and done what we all knew she was gonna come out here and do. We didn't know it was gonna actually be on this level. And I am so proud of you, Snoop. I swear to God, I am. And yeah, you can call me though. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But here y'all go.
When is she running for city council? When is that? When is that happening? When are you running for city council?
So my question is, I know that when you're released from incarceration, being on parole or supervised release is not easy. It is a challenge for many people. So I'd like for you to speak on that, how much of a challenge it was for you, and for the women who you support who are now being returned to the community, what kind of support do you provide for them regarding complying with supervision? We know that sometimes it seems like if you just breathe too deeply, you're going to wind up back in prison for some kind of violation. It's very easy to be back behind the walls because of the restrictions of supervision. So can you talk about that a little bit, please?
My personal experience, I completely came off paper in 2008. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. Because of my drug addiction, I couldn't give a positive urine. So I just kept getting rearrested because I kept giving up positive urine. And when that great day came that I gave up a negative urine, that's when the doors opened for me. So February 3rd, 2008 was my last day on parole after being in and out, off and on for 22 years. I went to my parole officer's office just a slight bit early, but it happened to be her lunchtime. And she said, oh no, it's my lunchtime and you're gonna have to wait. I waited 22 years to get off paper, so I was not going to wait. But because I was in and out, and had parole officer after parole officer, her supervisor, which was my parole officer twice, I went around the corner to her office and told her, listen, I've been waiting 22 years to get off paper. Could you please help me get off paper before I have a whole new case and then I won't get off paper? So the people some of those people in those positions mistreat us. When they already know the struggles that we had. She knew what my struggles was, and I finally got it right, and one more time, I have to wait one more time. So what I try to do with women that are still on paper and struggling to go see the PO, and I don't want to talk to them, and I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do that, just do it, because it'll go on and on. My sentence is 15 years, but it took me 22 years to get off paper, because I didn't want to do what I was supposed to do. So the thing that I do, I try my best to encourage them, just go do it, get through it, and get past it. And I had the opportunity to sit at a conference across the table from my former PO. Because now we just two women. She's no longer my PO, and I'm no longer the that. So that's my experience.
Spanky wanted to speak to that question too, but I just want to say I don't think that the parole system or the court system is the place to deal with drug addiction. So when you're cycling in and out of the system as a result of a drug problem, that just feels wrong to me. But Spanky wanted to speak on what it's like to be on supervision and how difficult it is to get off.
When you first come home, and I'm gonna say this for me, when you first come home, your first line of trying to figure out what you want to do with your life is your parole officer. They're the first person that you look to give you some type of direction. Go here, and maybe you need to go here. But the DC system is so broken that when you come home, they can't help you because their information is outdated. They refer you to programs that no longer exist. And, you know, their whole attitude towards you, for real, they make you feel like the least little thing you're going to do, I'm going to send you back to jail. You know, don't walk across the street wrong, don't smack nobody in the argument or nothing. And it's like, it's intimidating. And I tell, like, friends of mine, when you come home, you gotta have a mental focus that you just part of the process of me getting where I'm trying to get, so I'm gonna deal with you. And you just have to deal with it. And try to stay, you know, a lot of people take themselves through a lot of unnecessary changes, like Sandra kept speaking, using drugs and stuff. that can be part of your trying to get yourself together. If you got issues, those POs need to, see that, put you in, get you, refer you to programs and stuff like that. But they can't do that because the system is broken. And when we came, first people we addressed was probation and parole, right? And their whole attitude was like, they didn't feel like they should be held accountable for the part they play. But y'all the first people we gotta see. You go to the halfway house, check in. First person you gotta go lay eyes on is your parole officer. And when I went and met mine, she gave me this whole list of this, that, and other I better not do. And I'm just looking at her like, okay, then tell me something to help me. You told me what everything gonna get me in trouble. I understand that. Then tell me something that's gonna help. Oh, but I don't know if this program, everything, she gave me like 5-6 pieces of paper. All those programs, the Strive, Incorporated, the Project Empowerment wasn't even existing when I came home. I've been home for 15 years, March. Yeah, March this past, I've been home 15 years. And like that first little 4 years I had to be on parole was like so intimidating. And I had got into a situation, like when I came home, my grandmother, man, I swear she put me in the position I'm in right now. I own a shopping center, got my own barber shop, I got cow. It's just my grandmother did it for me. And I got into a situation with one of my tenants that she made me put the knuckles on her, and she went and filed charges on me. I wasn't even aware that I wasn't even on parole no more. They never sent me a letter. They didn't send me nothing telling me I was on parole in 2010. Didn't even know it. So when I knew she filed these charges, these assault charges on me, I went to go see them and tell them what happened. So the man, he listened to the story and everything. He said, so Ms. Walters, why are you here telling them? I said, well, to let the people know, what I'm saying, what's happening. So when y'all see the paperwork, y'all at least can give me a heads up if I'm going back to jail or something. He said, Ms. Walters, you've been on parole for a year. Me and him standing there staring at each other. I said, I told you that's something you should have told me. He said, you didn't know? No, I didn't know. I probably would have stopped her. But I'm thinking, and it's just like, but the system of the way they operate is just broken. They just another line of COs. They act like, they act like COs rather than help. They're not help. And if y'all in y'all parole, right? Help. That's what they need, help. Stay updated on programs that can help somebody that's coming home. Know the companies that will hire ex-offenders, because on that list that my PO gave me, I had to get a job. So, I'm like, who hired felons? She couldn't tell me that. You know what I'm saying? And it's listings of government agencies that provide opportunities for ex-felons because they get tax breaks for that. A PO should know that. Because me coming home, I want to know where I can go get this job that you telling me that I got to get, or I'm going back to jail. So help me get the job. So, this be a help. This help. You know what I'm saying? Stay updated. What's out there for people in my situation that got these charges and stuff. I don't know if they hard for what I did or whatever, but I'm out there beating my feet because I don't know where to go. And this nowhere to send somebody, because you the first person that's looking to for the help or the direction. With, what I'm saying? This help them get bus tokens, a lot of that type of stuff. Help.
I have one quick thing to say, and Melinda, I love that question. Melinda Moy from PBS in DC, thank you. But I had an amazing experience just recently, like within the last 2 weeks. Met a gentleman who's now working within the DC Department of Corrections, but he's actually from the UK. And he started his career in the UK, in London, and he was a parole officer, the equivalent of a parole officer in the UK. And he is now working in corrections here. And I got introduced to him, and somebody said, you have to talk to this gentleman. And I said, oh, tell me more. And he said, I got here, and I just didn't understand what was happening, because the way we did it in the UK and the way I did it in my whole career in the UK was, as a parole officer, I was a support system. Our entire focus and our entire role was rehabilitation. We were trained in restorative justice. We were trained in rehabilitation. We were trained as counselors. And we were not considered as part of, the system in the sense of policing and corrections, right? And I thought that was so amazing. And just the message that, like, there is a different way. It doesn't have to be this punitive system where the parole officers are essentially rewarded for locking people back up, rather than being rewarded for people being successful, right? So there's a different way. We just have to get there, right? Yeah.
Hi. Good evening. I don't have a question. I just wanted to make a statement. Snoop is what they call you. I'm crying. I've been crying since babies went on stage. Gratefully, y'all spare incarceration. But I just appreciate your opinion. Because it's good to know that had I been incarcerated, it would have been women like y'all ready to raise me, like I was saying. I have to tell y'all this too. I actually saw my sister Sandra cry for the first time ever tonight. That just shows me her passion for what y'all do. So keep doing what y'all doing. I just needed to say that.
I hope that somehow the mayor's folks get to hear what's going on here. I'm clear what ain't happening. And this is nuts in 2018 because we're all supposed to be educated and well developed. And this is just a backward turn as you guys come out of that kind of mess and can't get no help. And I don't think the rest of us pay tax dollars for you not to get what you need. Because in the end, you put into the system too. So let me just say this. I know for a fact that Robert White cares about what programs work and doesn't.
Not Robert White.
That's a bad dude. I hope he gets to be mayor of DC one day because he gets it. He doesn't have to be educated. But every other single member of city council, I'm not thinking very good about any of this. So let me just say this. Anything that you think can be done by groups of people, just put it out there because people need to come out and help you. If you're real specific about what you need, it can be done. It can be done. So before you part company tonight, we lay us on some numbers and some names. So some of us can be helpful. Everybody's not going to be helpful. But you got a lot of people going to be helpful.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diane. Montwine. Hi. I would like to say I did 10 years on parole. My first job, I was working for Green and Associates. I had a job before I even arrived at the halfway house. I would like to say that the lady at the halfway house that was there, she went to my job and went to my employer to discuss my charges with him and how long I had been away. Thank God for Mr. Green. He told her that I'm not concerned with her past. I'm concerned with her present, and I believe she'll be an asset to my company.
That's right.
Those 10 years on parole was a struggle. The first PO told me, you'll never get off. After 10 years, I got a lady PO within 2 months, I was off parole. And I like to thank all my wild family. I love them dearly for us being able to go back into the halfway house to share our testimonies, to go other places, to help women that are coming out, to know what it was like for us as we arrived and came home, our struggles, that it hasn't always been easy. After being gone for 19 years, it wasn't easy for me when I came home. I had more support from my wild family than I did my own family, which most of them was deceased, and only left with 5 sisters, 3 brothers, all was deceased when I got home except for 1 sister, 1 brother. I had to make the decision when things didn't go right to say, please, let me come back in this halfway house. I can't stay with these people. I come too far and I'm not going back. Today I've been home for 18 years. And I thank God for my cousin here and her family that supported me. my sister over here with Grace Prayer Ministry, that we support each other and other ministries as well as going into the streets. And I'm just thankful for all of the wild women and just being able to share, to give back, because it wasn't a bed of roses and coming out after 19 years and just thrown and all your family gone. But by the grace of God, I was able to make it and have the support of all of them. And I just love them dearly. And I'm grateful to be here tonight.
So I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to piggyback on Shirley over there. Hi, Shirley. This is Bridget, Monet's friend. I'd like to speak on my experience with corrections. I've worked at Hope Village, I've worked at Oak Hill, and it's an antiquated system. It is designed to send folks back. The bottom line is, anybody in pocket to turn it around, if it comes in numbers, you better turn it around. Because this is cracked eggs out here in terms of our young. They don't see no hope, they don't care. They come from, I guess, abandoned parental. You know, if people went in the system and their parents didn't help or they didn't get the support system, I live around a lot of young kids, and they are the millennials, and they will tell you they don't care. And if you get in their way, they will eliminate you off this land. So you better act like you know. I mean, some of them will receive positive reinforcement, but for the most part, respect is get out my way. That's what respect to them is. And I try to be sincere, but most of all, you all came in here when she said, I'm covered. Yeah, you was covered by love. So if they don't know what love is, if you don't know what love is, if you don't know how to present it and touch and feel, you're going to get it. I'm telling you, you're going to get it. It is not. I live in Ward 8. And they don't mind bang, 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 bang. When I say Ward 8, the other day I was in church and they spoke of a death on Isherwood Street. Now I used to live in Raleigh, okay, for a long time. And I had to go and they told me, they said, let me tell you something. Do you really want to live here? Because if you don't, you need to understand that the police is not going to save you. Okay, a little boy called me the B word, and I stood my ground, but I didn't know if I was going to live or die. So those kids now that I'm speaking about, they're grown, and they're raising kids, and they are not to be played with. I mean, I'm talking about they don't have no remorse for nothing. I mean, walking up and down the street, whether you're in the grocery store, they'll reach over you, they're rude, and it's not much you can say because those are the kids that was left behind. For real, for real. Okay, they go in the system, they high five to come out. They not really coming out. Like that guy that did that massive murder. How could you eat a pizza and 5 people are dead? He ate a pizza and the people were dead. So this is what we up against. So if anybody again, if they say something about numbers, then that's what we need to do.
I'm just my name is Wanda Page, and I am the director of the Graceville Page Prison Ministry. I've been in, my mom was one of the first women that they allowed to come to Lorton Reformatory. I am a Washingtonian. I am a mother. I have a son that's incarcerated. Sister Diane Twine, y'all call Ma Twine, she's my friend. And I just want to continue to tell you all, encourage you all to continue to do what you do and be an example to this new generation, but don't leave out God, because God is the source of allow you all to come back and be an example. And I just want to say that I love you, LaShawn, and I love all of you all. I haven't met you all, but just keep the good work up.
Thank you.
One short final comment, question?
It's going to be short. I have to say I didn't know quite what to expect, but I have an organization that I need to talk to you guys about to see how we can collaborate. Recently, we've been able to partner with a local Baltimore organization that did the consent decree. That's also been a model for the UN. Part of our program is to do workforce and business development for reentry young people 18 to 24. So I need to talk to you all about some things that we can do together and maybe expand this.
Thank you. So before we go, I wanted to see if you ladies have any final thoughts or comments. And someone brought up the point that we all need to be working together. So how can people get involved in supporting the Wire and on the issues that you're addressing?
So I'll just share our website. It's www.thewiredc.org. Also, if you want to, you can go onto my personal website. I also have a book. It's called Through the Wire, My Search for Redemption. And it's all about my life prior to incarceration. And I named it Through the Wire, My Search for Redemption because I feel like these women have been a huge part of my transformation process, but there's nothing in the book about my change process or my reentry process. It's all about youth violence, growing up in the inner city, what led me to make the choices that I made that landed me in prison. And so that website is www.lashawnaspeaks.com, and it's spelled LASHONIA. And go into the website, check us out. There's a donate button. You can send us a request if you want us to come out and talk to your agency or organization or your family and friends more about the work that we do. You can reach us through that website.
Final thoughts?
And I was also actually going to ask and shout out LaShawna. I don't know if she wants to say anything more, but LaShawna is also working with the DC government, doing some really amazing restorative justice work with young people and around intervening in preventing violence, right? So as we start to sort of trace this back, we need to trace it back to its sources and think about ways. And I always think about what the young lady said over here. I always think about the organization based in LA, Homeboy Industries. Has anybody heard of Homeboy Industries? One of the longest running, organizations in the country that's doing, they do gang intervention work, but also reentry work. And the motto of the founder of that organization, the motto of the organization is, nothing stops a bullet like a job. And I would sort of add to that the other things that stop bullets are education and stories. So just thinking about how we all, as part of the community, can be part of this process in whatever the way that we have to contribute. I said before, but if you have a job to give, reach out to LaShawna and her team, and perhaps there's a returning citizen woman who they're working with who needs that job. You get a whole team of recommendations here, right? If you can mentor, there's several programs in DC supporting returning citizen entrepreneurs, and those folks need mentors in their fields. If you are an entrepreneur or a business owner, can you support somebody else who's coming up? If you have money to give, please give it. But if you don't have money to give, there's many other ways to get involved, because as a community, we can turn this around, right? So the ways that we can all be part of it. And just sometimes it's as simple as listening to somebody's story and hearing them and seeing them. And this work is about reducing the stigma as well. A lot of the women said, I had the felon label, or I was an ex-felon, right? And we get past, as we start to share stories and have people speak their truth and have these women out front, that we can get past those labels, right? So that we're all just human beings and a community, and we start to set those labels aside. And that's the way we can kind of get to where we're headed here, with a restorative justice-based system rather than a retributive, punitive system that's cycling people in and out or locking people up for the rest of their lives. So you get the last word. You got the first word, now you
I just wanted to stress that incarceration isn't the cure for drug addiction. That's what happened to me. I had a drug addiction, and society thought incarceration was the cure for that. So until I addressed my drug addiction, I stopped becoming incarcerated. I haven't been incarcerated in 13 years, because I stopped. So locking someone up because they're high off drugs, it's not going to cure their drug problem. Then once we get a grip on the drug problem, we find out what happened that made it get to that point. So I just want to encourage everybody to give your family members, friends, just give them a break, give them a chance, and watch their life change.
Thank you. So we're really grateful to have the collaboration with Women of the Wire and to have your stories as part of a special collection at the DC Public Library where they'll be preserved for forever and the public can access them and you can use them as a resource and a tool to educate and teach and advocate. And doing oral history, it's not about having the training necessarily, we can help with that. It's about having the passion to have the critical conversations that need to happen in our community. It's about centering the voices that need to be leading these conversations. And we are so grateful that tonight we got to hear from you and learn from you and talk about these issues. So this is just the beginning, hopefully, with this project. We're excited to see where it goes. And if any of you have stories that you want to help facilitate and collect and become part of the official record of DC history and then help create conversations from them, please come do speak to us. Maybe these ladies can tell you about their experience and we can all work together. So thanks you all for coming tonight. It's been really fantastic to hear from all of you and let's keep the conversation going.